I told Dan, you still got it. By the way, back then I was a freshman representative, and Dan had been there a little while, and he gave me a lot of advice. So I hope that's okay for me to take advice from Dan, isn't it? All right. Anyway, first of all, thank you so much. Welcome, and thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us. I know you have a lot of other things you could be doing. That you're here means the world to me, and it is tremendous. I was in touch last weekend with Dwayne Fear, the chair in Ashtabula County, Tom, the chair here, and Janet Carson, the chair in Geauga County, and there was some desire to make sure we did a Northeast Ohio swing at some point before the primary. So I started looking at the schedule, which makes everybody nervous. Probably is not the best approach. But I realized we had something to do in Akron that was going to end around noon, and we were going to end up in Cleveland Heights, I think, a little bit later, and we could actually swing through all three counties this afternoon. We're doing that, and we're glad to be here, and I'm glad to have a chance to spend a little time with you. So let me just talk a little bit about, as Dan said, I was at that Consumer Bureau until November 24th of last year. And let me talk a little bit about what that experience was. After the Attorney General election in 2010, I was licking my wounds, and I lost that race by 1 point, in a race that I thought that I was going to win. In fact, had a call the afternoon of Election Day from the Republican State Party chair congratulating me because he thought I was going to win, and then I didn't. But 3 days later, I got a call from a woman I'd never heard of and did not know, named Elizabeth Warren. Is that a name that any of you know? She was actually in the state for us yesterday. I couldn't get her up to Northern Ohio yesterday. She was here in Cincinnati doing something for Sherrod Brown, and then we did an opioid crisis event. She's becoming kind of an expert on that. And then we were in Columbus. We did a fundraiser. We did a rally at Ohio State with a lot of young Dems. She is my very good friend. And when she called me that day, and repeatedly thereafter, she wanted me to come and work with her in setting up the Consumer Bureau. And the new Consumer Bureau was a brand new agency created out of the wreckage of the financial crisis of 2008, as Dan accurately mentioned, was devastating to Ohioans and people across the country. And as we came to describe it, millions of people lost their jobs, millions of people lost their homes, and we all lost trillions in retirement savings because of the fallout from the Wall Street shenanigans and irresponsible behavior there. And part of the answer to that was to create a new agency whose job would be to stand on the side of all of us and make sure we're treated fairly in the financial marketplace. And that meant taking on the biggest banks and the most powerful financial companies in this country, and frankly in the history of the world, really, when you think about the size of these mega banks these days. And Elizabeth asked me if I would come and head the enforcement arm of that agency and build the enforcement arm, because we were building that agency from scratch. And I said, well, how am I going to do that? I mean, my wife and I had twins who were in 6th grade at that time, and we weren't going to move to Washington. She's very persuasive, though, and she said to me, well, you know, Bruce and I, we've done long-distance commute between different law schools at times, and what I should have done was ask Bruce what he thought, but she made it all sound pretty good. So before I knew it, I signed up to do that for a year, maybe 2, and go back and forth every weekend at my own expense, because I was choosing to live in Ohio, and nobody from my family thought it made sense to move, and I didn't want to move. So we did that. And we did that for the next 5 months, and I was busy setting up the Bureau. And then she threw me a curveball. She recommended to President Obama that I should be the one to head the new agency. And I said to her, I thought you were going to do that. She ended up, as you know, going back to Massachusetts and running for the US Senate, and now she's a senator, so it just goes to show that there's some karma somewhere in the universe, and sometimes things come out right. But she recommended me to the president and sent me over to the Oval Office for an interview, and I was, a little nervous about that. It's not an everyday interview location. And when I got there, though, I could see it was going to be all right, because sitting outside his office working for him at the time was Reggie Love. Does anybody remember Reggie from the campaign? Was really a constant companion of President Obama during the campaign. And I had met Reggie a number of places around Ohio. And out of his office bounces President Obama, and he says, "Reggie and I were just talking about you. We realized we usually see you in some VFW hall somewhere in Ohio." And I thought, this is going to be all right. So anyway, we talked about the job, and he told me how important he thought this work was going to be in terms of establishing the principle that there should be consumer protection in the financial marketplace, not just now and not just a few years from now, but for all time to come. And by the way, those of you seeing what's happening at that agency now, they are, as they're doing everywhere across the board in this federal administration, trying to roll back everything and anything that has anything to do with the former president. And it is wrong, even when it hurts people, like upending the health care for millions of Americans. Just because it has President Obama's name on it, they want to undo it, and it's wrong. However, that bureau will persevere and will rise again. Let me talk about the 6 years of work that we did. First of all, we realized we needed to give people a voice. People who get cheated out of $100 or $150 or have an error on their credit report that gets in the way of getting a loan, or being called by abusive debt collectors all hours of the day and night. I don't know if any of you ever experienced that, but it's pretty disconcerting and pretty oppressive. And they start calling family members and calling in the workplace. Most of these things are illegal, but if they think they can get away with them and get some leverage on you, they will do that. And we started a complaint line that people could bring those complaints to us, and we would work to fix the problems. Over the time I was there, we received 1,300,000 complaints, and we worked to fix many of them. And I'll give you an example. We had one situation where there was a service member, and those of you who have served, and those of you who know people who served, many of them start out, they're 18, 19 years old. It's the very first time they've left home and been on their own. And they have a guaranteed paycheck from the U.S. government. So they are heavy targets for predatory lenders and people who would take financial advantage because they're dealing with their life for the first time. And if you go to military bases around the country, as I have done many of them, you will find some of the worst predatory lenders right outside the gates of the military base, right down the street, congregating there, waiting to take advantage of people. And this young man had gotten into a car loan. It was a terrible car loan. It was costing thousands of dollars more than it should have. And his dad was really mad about it. Mad at him, but the son, he just wanted a car. He now had an income, he wanted a car. And he was mad at the lender, and he brought complaints everywhere he could think of, and eventually he found his way to us. And we looked at that complaint, and we looked at the situation. We looked at, it was a program called the Miles program for making these loans. And we thought it was wrong, we thought it was fraudulent, we thought it was exploitative, and we went after the bank, we went after the lender, and when we finished with them, we got thousands of dollars back for him and for 1,600 other service members who'd been mistreated in the same way. I don't know if it's still there, but the father then did a video to describe his experience, and we were pretty powerfully moved by that. So, but we also took actions of that kind against those who were violating the law or cheating others. And over the time I was there, we brought hundreds of those actions. We put $12 billion back in people's pockets, 30 million Americans, including many people around Ohio. So that was the work that we were doing, fighting for fairness and trying to change the behavior of a lot of these institutions. Now, in 2016, Donald Trump was elected. That was a bit of a surprise to some people, and was very unwelcome news for our agency, because almost immediately they started baying for me to be fired because I was being too aggressive toward the banks. That's always been the criticism. I was too aggressive. I thought I was just sort of leveling the playing field myself, but that's the complaint. The Wall Street Journal, I think, in 2017, editorialized against me personally 10 separate times. But I told the administration that if they tried to fire me, I would fight them. I would fight them in court. I didn't know if I would win, but they would have a mess on their hands, and if they wanted to take that on, that's what they would get. And they never really wanted to do that. So I stayed through that full year, and kept fighting, kept taking enforcement actions, and I had another big job that I needed to finish. And that was to finish a rule on payday lending nationally to crack down on how it takes advantage of people. And we did that, and it is now law of the land. It took effect in November. There will be efforts to roll it back, I know that. There would be whenever we finished it. But I felt conscientiously obliged to finish that, and would have kicked myself, I'm sure, the rest of my life if the years of work we put into that had not seen their way through. Having finished that, I had a few more months left on my term. I thought that I should consider coming back here and finding this fight for governor of Ohio to change the direction of politics in the state and change the direction of politics in our country. And that's what I began to think that I really should do. Before I left Washington, I was able to sit down with President Obama and seek his blessing as to, I was leaving a few months before I otherwise might have, and he encouraged me to come back and do this. And that's why I got into the governor's race here. And by the way, what do I now find here in Ohio? This week, we had the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives resign his office because it's come out that there's an FBI corruption investigation of the State House involving payday lending lobbyists, pay to play, paying for foreign trips for the Speaker in return for legislative favors. Now, we don't know the whole story there, but it is ugly. It is very, very un-Ohioan, if you ask me, although we've had our share of some of this stuff over the years. And it is a sign that we're going to need to clean up the State House in 2018. And that's an industry that I know is opposed to me, and I'm glad that they will be tied up with an investigation this year. Maybe that'll make it a little harder for them to come after me, which I'm sure they would like to do. But let me say this. I can think back to 2006, and some of you in this room will remember that, some of you won't. That was a year where we had scandals in state government. Republicans had everything in state government. There were scandals, and it allowed us to win a lot of offices that year. It was CoinGate. Do you remember that one? The Bureau of Workers' Compensation had invested money in rare coins, which was a very bizarre thing to do. Not in bonds, not in normal financial instruments, in rare coins. And it came out that the rare coin dealer that they were investing with was the former Lucas County Party Republican Party chairman. So that didn't make it seem any more sensible, although you could at least understand what the motivation was. And that year we won office and we cleaned that up. I was the treasurer. It was my job to oversee the investments and make sure that all of those things were rooted out, which we did. And then you may remember 2 years later, we had the resignation of the Attorney General, and I had ran and won the special election and had to clean up some of the things in that office as well. So we are used to doing this, and we can do this again. And as Danny said, it's okay to call you Danny? Okay. My son is Daniel, and he likes Danny. So I've always told him I like the adults who still go by Danny. I think that's a great thing. We also had to clean up those scandals on Wall Street after 2008, 2009, when I was at the Bureau. So that's part of what we'll need to do this year. But let me talk about Betty Sutton and I. Do you know Betty Sutton? She's my running mate. I will tell her spontaneous applause upon mentioning her name. She is my partner in this. In fact, we had a candidate forum, just the one in Akron earlier today, and she and I were both there, and we decided we would sort of take turns answering the questions because she knows her stuff as well as I do, and she's a tremendous, strong public figure. And also, by the way, has a record of getting real results. We are running this year focused on the kitchen table issues that we hear around Ohio are most on people's minds, the economic issues that affect them and their families, the things you worry about in worrying about yourself and your children and grandchildren and their futures. It is access to affordable health care. It's improving education and training in Ohio so we can secure our futures in the workplace. And it is spreading out economic opportunity all across the state so that nobody's left out or left behind. And when they talk about economic statistics and they talk about averages, averages can seem like one thing. But the real, what's going on in the communities who are all over the place, and the averages is composed of all of us, actual individual human beings, can feel very different. And it does often in Ohio, and does right now around Ohio, and I see it as we go around the state. So those are the things that we're focused on. And we have a track record of getting real results on those issues. Let me tell you about Betty. When she was in the Congress and the auto industry was flat on its back and in real danger in 2007, 2008, after the financial crisis, she came up with an inspired idea, cash for clunkers. Do you remember the bill? She likes to call it the CARS Act, but she recognizes everybody else calls it cash for clunkers. The idea was, at a time when people weren't buying cars and the age of the average car was getting older and older on the road, to provide an incentive to get those older cars off the road, replace them with newer cars, and it would be environmentally friendly, which helped some people buy into it, but also would stimulate the auto industry. It was really important. It was bipartisan legislation. It was a good idea. It passed and got funded, and it made a big difference to saving the auto industry, and particularly Northeastern Ohio. I was the Attorney General in 2009 when first Chrysler and then General Motors went through packaged bankruptcies, and they were going to sweep a lot of things under the rug very fast. And we had to get into those bankruptcies and protect plants, protect retirees, protect tax and environmental interests of the state of Ohio, and a lot of other things, and we did that. And out of the work she did, the work I did, and the work many others did together, including President Obama with the Recovery Act, we saved the auto industry and saved Northeastern Ohio's economy, which was incredibly important. Betty also, when she was in the Congress, worked on the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, and she had a key amendment, the pre-existing conditions provision, the one that says if you lose your job or have to change jobs, they can't discriminate against you and take away your ability to get health insurance simply because you had a pre-existing condition, which means that you had been sick or maybe you've now been diagnosed with something or been injured. You know, something people really worry about, right? If I have to lose my job, it's generally not voluntary, but if it is or isn't, now I can't get health insurance. You know, how am I going to make it? How's my family going to make it? It's devastating. And that was covered in the bill, but it was going to be phased in over time. And she recognized that phasing that in over time meant families were going to continue to be hurt and worried sick about this until it was phased in. And she moved to have it be done immediately and sponsored that amendment, and it was passed on a bipartisan basis. So she has a track record of getting results. And I have a track record of getting results. When I was state treasurer, we worked with small businesses across the state to help them create jobs and grow. And we were very successful in that. We created many thousands of jobs by getting them timely infusions of investment capital at moments when they could actually expand and grow. We also worked on the foreclosure crisis. And how did we do that? We did it by bringing together local officials and our great nonprofits and people from the for-profit sector who were willing to step up and work on what they saw was a problem around Ohio of many people in danger of losing their homes at that time. And we saved tens of thousands of homes by bringing people together and working together. And as Attorney General then, it was my job after the crisis to go after Wall Street and bring back money for our pension systems that had been badly hurt by the things that happened on Wall Street and a lot of fraud. And we did that. So that's the track record we have. And so when people are thinking about what they want to see in a governor, I hope what they want to see is somebody who has on our minds the things that are on your minds and has the credibility to get into office and actually make a difference and make change and make improvements that will matter in our lives. And that's what we stand for this year. So let me just say, we have a tremendous opportunity this year. And this State House corruption scandal opens the door even further for us. We also have a great pattern here, which is that every 12 years in Ohio, there's a governor and U.S. Senate race at the same time. So some people come out for the Senate race, some people come out for the governor's race. It bumps the turnout up. It tends to help us. And when there's a Republican in the White House and we get the midterm effect going our way, balancing against the perceived problems with the White House, we do very well in Ohio. In 1958, we won the governorship, Mike DeSalle, in that scenario. In 1970, with Jack Gilligan, we won the governorship. In 1982, with Dick Celeste, we won the governorship. 1994, we did not. That was Clinton's first midterm, and we had the contract with America going the other direction on us. 2006, we won with Ted, and now we have 2018. Patterns are just that, they're patterns. They're not self-fulfilling prophecies. We have to work at it, but we have a real opportunity this year. The other thing is, when that happens, a lot of people see the opportunity. A lot of candidates come forward. In every one of those years when we won the governorship, we had a primary, and candidates had to fight through a primary. Now, I don't know any candidate who loves a primary or welcomes a primary, but I can tell you, having fought through this primary, I know it's made me a better candidate. And I know that it has made us a better political campaign, and we have gotten started earlier, and we've gone farther, faster, and I hope that all of you are going farther, faster, because we do have an election. Let me remind you, not just in November, but in May. We have a primary election coming up here on May 8th, which is 3.5 weeks from now. And early voting has already begun. Has anybody voted yet? I voted, a few of you. If you get your voting done now and get it out of the way, then you can bring all the others and get them to vote too. By the way, you can also pick out the day you want to vote. Don't wait and maybe have it be a bad day on election day. Get a nice sunny day where you have a little bit of time, go down and vote. Do it. I would urge you to do that. But what I would say to you is, what we're doing in May is we're picking our nominees for the party for November in a number of different races. And I want you to really push hard and pass the word. If you find that you think Betty and I are your candidates in the governor's race, push very hard right now. Get that word out. Get it out to people. Make sure they're aware that there's an election, that there's something to vote for, and that they should step up and make a difference now. By the way, if you're not for us, ignore everything I just said. But we really have a tremendous chance here to change the course of Ohio. And there are lots of things to do here. Medicaid expansion is very much at risk. Only one Republican has ever stood up for it, and it's John Kasich, and I give him credit for that, but he's leaving after this year. He's kind of checked out at this point. And it is up to us to save that and save people's health care. What's happened with the for-profit online charter schools, pulling money out of our public schools, and wasting it and not educating our children, and now it's a scandal where we have $70 to $80 million missing because that ECOT went belly up in the middle of the year. 13,000 students were cast to the winds, and the CEO said sort of famously in his departure message, good luck, good riddance. And he took millions of dollars with him, and a lot of it went to Republican politicians on Capitol Square. That's the other scandal of this year that we're going to hang around their necks. But I will say to you that there's things we need to do and things we need to clean up. We need a different direction in the state. And when we change Ohio in 2018, we take a first big step to changing the United States of America in 2020. And that's all of what's at issue here. So I hope that you will be energized, that you will make sure others are energized, and that you will help us pass the word. First May 8th, then in November, then we change Ohio. Thank you. We had my old friend Elizabeth Warren in state yesterday, as I mentioned, and we had a really, really great time. We got a lot of pictures posted on Facebook and on the Twitter feed, and we will try to, I asked her, she'll come back later in the year. I think she'll come back if I'm the candidate. I'm not sure she will if I'm not. So there's incentive for you, and we'll get her up here to Northern Ohio then. So is there anything you want me to do, or you want any questions? Yes, sure. Okay. How long do I have?
He's the chairman.
No. How long do I have before I just hang this? Will I have to win? Till 5. All right, that's fine. Let's go. Yes. Yes.
The fact that we have last figure I heard, $2 billion rainy day fund in Columbus. When John Kasich took office, the schools got less money now, the municipalities get less money. Little Fairport Harbor had to pass 3 levees. The roads were like a bomb hit it in some instances. Now, my question is, when you become governor, I hope you do, will you do something to change that situation? Will you make sure more money money will come slowly.
Yep.
Where is it coming?
Yep. Yeah, actually, Dan talked about it and I didn't, so thank you for asking the question. And by the way, don't just hope I'm going to be the next governor, make it happen. But let me answer your question because, first of all, it is raining outside, as you can see, and we have an opioid crisis in this state, which is a very unusual situation and a tremendous catastrophic situation for a lot of families and a lot of communities. And I hear about it all over the state, and it's surprising sometimes who you hear it from. County official that I know in Southern Ohio told me her son got caught up in this, and she told me the story, and it's a sad story, and it's one of thousands and thousands and thousands across the state. So, to be hoarding state resources at a time when we're bleeding all kinds of catastrophe in our communities is wrong. But the point that Dan made and that you're reinforcing is an important one. We have a state legislature right now that is extremely hostile to local governments in the state. And I think it's a cynical hostility. They believe that people don't like government. So people won't kick up a fuss if they take money from the local government because it's just government, right? But they take money from the local government to make themselves look good, make their finances look good, to balance their budget, to stuff the rainy day fund and brag about it, or to give tax cuts back to people who often are the ones who need it the least. That's what they do. And who's hurt by that? We're all hurt by that because what is local government really? It is services. It is face-to-face quality of life services in the community. It's police. It's first responders. It's the addiction and treatment services that we need to deal with the opioid crisis. It's all of the things that state government itself doesn't provide, but is weakening our ability to provide it in Ohio. And if we don't have quality of life in our communities, then young people are going to want to leave. And businesses aren't going to want to come here. So it's a very short-sighted strategy. It's sort of like eating the seed corn is what it amounts to. And selling our future for the sake of looking good in the present. And I understand some of it was about somebody running for president of the United States, okay? But that doesn't make it good government. And I have said we need to end what is really a war on local governments. They raided the local government fund for the first time ever in 80 years of a bargain that had been a promise made and a promise kept. We have a state sales tax in the state, and the money was shared back with local governments. And the local government fund had been maintained for 80 years, and it's been raided under this administration. And it has now been cut all the way down by about half. We need to restore the local government fund. We need to stop, every time they touch something involving local government gets short end of the stick. The way they handled the MCO issue, the way they're now handling municipal centralized tax collection, the way they're shoving down felony fives now for the state prisons to the county jails, but the funding isn't going to follow that's commensurate with the need. So these are all things that we can change if we get somebody in there who respects local government, who will support local government, who will recognize that for us to succeed in Ohio, state and local government have to partner together the way we did during that foreclosure crisis. Yes?
I would put that in my
Okay.
Forget about it.
All right. Well, you just boiled it down pretty well there. I was just going to say one of the problems is 30-second commercials. How much can you say? But you did a pretty good job right there. So I didn't think about that. The other thing is, you talked about when you starve infrastructure, it always feels like, well, we'll just put that one off because we do that next year. We'll do it the following year. As though yesterday is always the same as tomorrow, right? Will, who goes around the state with me, hit a pothole the other day in his car, and it's costing $1,600. So who's ended up paying for the bad infrastructure? We all are. Okay, it's all on us. It may not be in the state's budget, but it's on us. And we can't keep putting that off. First of all, infrastructure is good work that builds our state and strengthens our communities. It is good paying work, all right? And we have to find ways to make sure that we prioritize that and get it done. I had hoped that we were going to get some real help from the federal government. Donald Trump promised during the campaign, he's a builder, right? The only thing he seems to want to build is the wall. He doesn't want to build bridges and roads and other things in the country. But they just spent $1.5 trillion on that tax bill, and now they don't have much left for infrastructure. They've blown up the deficit, and they're offering $200 billion for infrastructure. And you start spreading that among 50 states, it's not that much money. So we're going to have to do that ourselves. We're going to have to probably use bonded indebtedness. I've done that as state treasurer, where we had highway projects, and you can match the length of the financial obligation to the length of the value of the asset, and that makes sense, and we'll have to go to the people to do that. But we will have to do that on our own if we have to. And it will be good for the state, it will be good for our communities, and it will be good for working people in the state too, because it will mean jobs. So what else can I see? You can ask a question quickly, but I can't necessarily answer it quickly. So yes.
I just, we're talking about jobs. Are you going to do with the Ohio jobs private?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's called Jobs Ohio, and that certainly sounds good, right? Jobs Ohio. I mean, you know, we're for both of those things, right? It's been in a brand new direction and departure by this administration, which is to privatize economic development. And they've taken the liquor profits, which are state monies, and put them into this private corporation. Now, my big beef about it is that it's not transparent. I don't have any idea what they're doing, and neither do you, okay? And I've asked local officials, how much do you know about what they're doing? Because optimally, you want state and local government to cooperate on economic development, because in order to really bring jobs here, you got to have sites, and you got to have infrastructure, you got to have zoning, and everybody needs to be on the same page. And I hear from local officials, they don't really know what's going on either. So that's not a good strategy. But second, I can't look into that black box. Maybe they're actually doing some good things. It's possible, but it's also possible they're not. They talk about a return on investment formula, which sounds good, but I don't know what it is, and neither do you. And we don't know project by project whether they're meeting that formula or not. So what I've said about that is, I'm not going to know until I get into the governor's office whether that's working or not working, although I can tell you the job numbers are not great for Ohio. We have fewer jobs today in 2018 than we had in 2001. And the rate of job growth since the recession during the recovery of the last 8 years has been lower in Ohio than it's been in the rest of the country. So I'm not impressed, at least on the surface, by what the statistics show. But when we get in there, if there are things that are working, we'll build on those. If there are other things that are not working, we will throw those out or reform them. But we will make the whole thing more transparent, because the public deserves to know what's happening with its money. And I think we all deserve to know what kind of strategies are being pursued to promote the future of this state. So I think that that's fair enough. Anything else? Do I have more time? Another? Yes?
So I'm a student at Medford High School. How would you address concerns of gun violence and wordless students at schools and at other communities within Ohio, and what would you do to implement common sense gun reform and actually pass that through the state house?
Yeah, this is something that I'm hearing about. It wasn't at the beginning of the campaign. It's become a big issue in the last couple of months. And I'm a parent, as I mentioned earlier. My wife and I, we have twins. They're teenagers still. I mean, they think they're grown up because they're 19, but they're still teenagers. And it's impossible not to feel what parents everywhere and what all of us really feel about the gun violence. It's sickening in our society. We have put forward what I believe is the strongest and most comprehensive plan to address this, and it has multiple pieces. First of all, it involves tightening the gun laws in very specific respects. We need universal background checks to make sure we keep guns out of the hands of criminals and the mentally ill and domestic violence abusers. That last one's important, hasn't really been covered adequately before. We need to take all the modifications being made to legal firearms to turn them into illegal weapons, like bump stocks and high-capacity magazine clips, and ban those as well. I am not for banning specific weapons. I don't know that that's going to solve the problem, but I also think it's going to be very difficult to achieve that. We have a school safety plan that makes sense, that is in line with what Law Enforcement Ohio tells me, and I'm a former Attorney General, I talk to them a lot. Will they think work? It does not involve arming teachers en masse. They're teachers, they're not law enforcement officers, and you get to that school and they have a lot of people with guns, they won't know who the good guys and bad guys are. That could be a mess. And there are also things that I as governor can do without the legislature. So working with local law enforcement officials to intervene in the gang violence on the streets of our cities, which is part of this that goes unremarked. It's a significant problem. and crimes committed with guns, whether or not the gun is used in the crime, need to be punished severely. And those are things that have been shown to work around the country in Boston and St. Louis to reduce the violence. That's what I want to do. I mean, we can have slogans, we can have a political argument, which some people would like to do, and 4 years from now we can have gotten nowhere on this. I think that this plan that I've set forward is something that we can do. I don't know if we can do it easily in Ohio because the legislature's not moved a muscle on this. But in Florida recently, they had a package. It wasn't as strong as what I just laid out, but they had pieces of this. They were able to get that through their legislature. So I'd like to see us move on this. I'd like to see us make progress. I'd like to see us reduce the violence and save lives, and that's what we want to do. Thank you for that question. Anything else? Yes.
What is your position on alternative energy capabilities?
What does that say? Celebrate the wild. What's the down below? Wild wolves? Okay. All right. No, I'm sorry. Yes, what was your question?
Alternative energy.
Alternative energy, yes. Look, when I talk about economic development, I talk about we need to be a state that's positioned facing the future, not dragging ourselves back into the past, all right? And this is one of the glaring examples of how the legislature really took a wrong turn and has set us back in this state. We had put in place, when we were in office, ambitious goals about clean and renewable energy. And by the way, we were not alone in that. States around the country and countries around the world are moving in that direction quickly. And in part, it was to deal with the fact of energy dependence that we all had on the Middle East, all right? A lot of progress has been made, but not in Ohio, because they rolled back some of this, froze it in place, and now we're lagging behind other Midwestern states. And what does that mean? Wind turbines can be manufactured here, but we don't have the right policies to encourage people to do that as much here as we could. Solar panels can be built here, but we're, again, lagging for those reasons. We need to change that. We need to step into the future, and we need to push hard on that. They also have setback legislation that the legislature sneaked into an unrelated bill in 2014 with no real scrutiny, no real votes, that has really stifled wind power development in the state, and particularly in the western part of the state, where it was a really promising development. And even some Republicans now are trying to undo that because they recognize it was a wrong turn. But let me also talk about other things we need to do on economic development. The small business job creation work that I did as state treasurer, we could do that on a much bigger scale across Ohio if I'm governor. Half of our workforce is in small businesses, and 2 out of every 3 new jobs is created by small businesses. So instead of spending all our money on, obscene tax packages to bring people here from around the country, we do need to compete, but we should put more of the money into our local homegrown businesses that aren't trying to leverage us by claiming they're going to go to Tennessee and getting some big break from us. We should help them grow, all right? We also need better workforce development in the state. We have young people coming out of school and people in midlife, having to make transitions in the economy, and they want to fill jobs, but they don't have the right skills. Businesses want to fill jobs, but they don't have the right applicants. We need to close that gap, and we can do that through apprenticeship programs, through our community colleges. It could be 2-year degrees, it could be certification programs. It needs to be a variety of things. And we can strategize that from the state level much more effectively. We came out with a program the other day for free community college. When you really crunch the numbers on this and put it together with loans and grants that are otherwise available, you can do that in Ohio for $60 million. I mean, that's $60 million, but that's not that much money, and the payoff would be significant. We estimate that it would be 20 to 35% increase in enrollment and people getting into these programs. There's a variety of things we can do, but I do think renewable energy is part of the answer, and we need to be, stepping. And the other thing I'd say about that is there are companies from around the country that aren't in the renewable energy business, but they want to go places where they know that there's a consistent stream of renewable energy because they feel that's going to be a more certain future path for them. And they will not go to a state if it doesn't have it. And so we will lose out on companies like Amazon if we don't get that bid, which if we don't, that'll be one of the reasons. And another one of the reasons will be if we are not a progressive state, and I'll just be very forthright about this, we need to be a progressive state that is viewed by everyone and understands itself to be
tolerant and inclusive and celebrating of diversity in our communities and welcoming of others. If we don't do that, businesses won't want to locate here. All you have to do is look at North Carolina, where that legislature got caught up in all these small-minded ideological disputes and squabbles about bathrooms and other things, and businesses didn't want to go there, right? So we need to learn that in Ohio. And our legislature is still obsessed with those kinds of things and still looking backward. They're still trying to undo gay marriage. They still want to fight a rearguard action against that. They don't want to recognize that you can be married in Ohio and you can still lose your job, and you can lose your housing, and you can lose access to public services, and they haven't passed that bill yet, and we need to pass it. The Ohio Chamber of Commerce has come out in support of that bill to stop discrimination based on sexual orientation, because they know that it's going to cost us jobs not to be stepping into the future the way we need to do in the state. So it's the right thing to do, and it's something that will work for us, is to be a progressive state and to be attractive to people from around the country and to our young people who want to stay here. That's important.
All right, look, I'm told I have to go now. I will be, if you help me through the primary on May 8th, I will be back. If you don't, I don't know when I'm coming back. All right, so thank you very much.